Let's begin with walking through an all too familiar day in the office. Your day begins with a morning staff meeting. You expected it to last an hour, but items are discussed that weren't on the agenda, so it finally wraps up after 2.5 hours. You have a project meeting scheduled after lunch, followed by an open house planning meeting in which you were just notified about yesterday. Because of the unexpected time spent in the morning, you're stressed for time to prepare for the meetings you have in the afternoon. The project meeting goes completely off task, so very little was accomplished. The open house meeting was productive, but since it was unexpected, you're now staying late to finish up a report for the regional office needed at the close of the business day. Unfortunately, we've all shared experiences like these at one time or another, maybe some of us more often than we'd like. The reality is that meetings are critical to the success of teamwork and projects. They serve as a platform for solving problems, making decisions, sharing information, planning events, and the list goes on. So why do we often groan at the idea of just another meeting? Unfortunately, we've all experienced meetings that are mismanaged. They get off track, take too much time, have unclear agendas, and lack effective leadership. Hi, I'm Mark Madison, and in this segment I'm going to share with you 5 keys that are critical to leading effective meetings. So the time spent in your next meeting will be productive and valuable and not just another meeting. The first key is planning, which includes all the things that must be done to prepare for the meeting. The planning process will require the most work for you. However, thorough planning is absolutely vital to the success of the meeting. There are 9 steps in the planning process. We'll begin with the first step, which is to define the task. The task is the purpose or reason for the meeting. The task or purpose for your open house planning meeting could be deciding the theme for your station's upcoming open house event. In this example, the task of this meeting is making a decision. Think of the task as action, or what it is that you'll be doing during the meeting. The second step is to define the desired outcome. What are the expected results of the meeting? At the end of the open house planning meeting, we expect to have a decision as to the theme for that year's event. The desired outcome for this meeting is the theme. Other examples of possible desired outcomes could be an action plan, a solution, or a commitment. Once you have the meeting's task and desired outcomes defined, you can complete the agenda. What agenda items are needed to help meet the desired outcome? What items would be necessary to help us decide on a theme for our open house? In this example, it may be helpful to include a review of the themes we had in previous years. When establishing agenda items, write out the desired results you want for each. For a particular agenda item, are we expecting a decision to be made, or is it time for sharing ideas or information? Once you have an agenda for your meeting finalized, it's now time for the fourth step, to establish the sequence of meeting activities. If this is a meeting where people are coming together for the first time, it's a good idea to plan an icebreaker activity to give participants a chance to get to know one another. It's important to include ample time at the beginning of the meeting for an introduction and time at the end for concluding the meeting. Some of the strategies you might consider when planning the sequence of your meeting activities include discussing higher priority topics before those of lower priority, building discussions or information towards a conclusion, or alternating between high energy and low energy topics. It's most important to think of the energy level of your participants and plan the sequencing accordingly. The fifth step of the planning process is to determine who should attend, the roles of your participants, and the ground rules for that meeting. Meeting attendance has 2 categories, essential and optional. Essential attendees should be those individuals who have relevant information or expertise, need to be involved in making a decision, or those that have the responsibility for implementing a decision that is made. You may also consider those people affected by a decision essential as well. Optional attendees would be those individuals who are indirectly affected by the meeting's outcome or have higher functional responsibilities during the time of the meeting. During the meeting, there are several leadership tasks that can be shared among the meeting's participants. Dividing these tasks among a group's members and assigning roles will enable you to more effectively lead the meeting. Some examples of the roles you may assign to meeting participants are timekeeper, recorder, and process observer. In addition to these roles, ground rules should be established to help guide the process of the meeting and to assist in accomplishing the task. Think of some ground rules prior to the meeting, then give the opportunity for participants to add to your list. This will create ownership among the participants, and it will give you a guideline for managing counterproductive behavior if needed. Respect one another's views and ideas, no side conversations, and one person talks at a time are some examples of ground rules you may consider for your next meeting. You're now ready to decide when to hold the meeting and for how long. Schedule the meeting for when all essential people and information are available. Decide what time the meeting is to begin and what time it is to end. Use the agenda to help you determine the time needed to reach the meeting's desired outcome. The seventh step of planning process is to determine the meeting logistics. The logistics include things such as meeting location, room layout, and what equipment and supplies are needed. When possible, choose a meeting location that has the facilities that best support your meeting's task and desired outcome. For example, larger rooms work best for meetings with a longer time commitment. Also consider the room layout and the arrangement of the table and chairs. For example, does the layout support a meeting that requires a lot of interaction between participants? This is also the time to decide what AV equipment is needed and to make these arrangements ahead of time. We've now reached the point where you notify your participants. One of the most important steps in the whole planning process is notifying the meeting participants as early as possible. Give participants all the information regarding the meeting time and location. Provide participants with the agenda so they can come to the meeting prepared with information and ideas. Depending on the task and desired outcome, you may consider asking the participants for additional agenda items. If you choose to do so, be sure to get a fair assessment of the amount of time those agenda items are expected to take, as they may alter the time allocated for the meeting. The last step of the planning process is setting up the meeting room. Give yourself plenty of time for setting up the room and getting all of your audiovisual equipment ready. This will allow your meeting to start on time, and it will set the tone for the meeting. I just shared a lot of information with you on how to plan for your meeting. This planning process does take some time, but again is critical to the success of your meeting. So now let's move on to the second key of leading effective meetings, starting. How you start the meeting will help establish the energy level, so you want to be energetic and organized. Because you've already shared the agenda with participants prior to the meeting, a brief review is sufficient. This is also the time you'll want to conduct the icebreaker activity, if applicable. Assign roles to participants, like timekeeper and recorder, and introduce the ground rules for the meeting. Once the meeting is underway, focusing, which is the third key, is important. Here are some tips on how you can keep the meeting focused on the task and adhere to the agenda. Use an easel chart to help focus the group's attention to key decision and information during discussions. Use the parking lot method, which is capturing off-topic or non-relevant items on a separate piece of paper. These items are now accounted for, but can be discussed at a later time, either at a different time during the meeting or outside the meeting altogether. Also, at the end of each agenda item, summarize accomplishments and/or decisions, and check in with the participants for their agreement. Facilitating is the fourth key to leading an effective meeting. As the leader of the meeting, you must facilitate the participants' involvement, deal with conflict, manage differences, and keep communication open. No pressure, right? So how can you encourage participation from all participants? Here are some techniques you might want to consider. Seek input from lower-level participants first. Ask open-ended questions. Use active listening skills. Be attentive to each participant's input. Ask for concrete examples if needed for better understanding. Be supportive of new ideas. And help distinguish assumptions from facts. An often unfavorable responsibility of the leader of the meeting is managing differences and helping participants to resolve conflict. By establishing ground rules, you've hopefully created the environment where participants feel safe to share creative new ideas. At times, though, these ideas may differ and can create tension among participants. As the leader, participants are going to look to you to help manage these differences. So you want to focus the attention on the conflicting ideas rather than people involved. Help define the common ground or areas in which there's agreement. Then isolate the points of disagreement and help generate a brainstorm of alternatives. If the conflict is such that no common goal or agreement can be reached, then schedule a separate meeting to deal directly with the conflict and then refocus the meeting. It's important for you to stay calm, use listening skills, and refer to the ground rules to help manage the process. Use the parking lot technique if topics are brought up that are outside the conflict itself. And the final key to leading effective meetings is how you end the meeting or concluding. In this stage, you'll want to summarize the meeting's accomplishments. Compare those accomplishments with your desired outcomes and identify any unfinished business. Finalize who will do what and when so everyone leaves with the same action plan. It's suggested that if you try any of the tips or techniques discussed during this segment, ask for feedbacks so you'll know what worked well and what you might change for the next meeting, because there will always be another meeting. So there you have the 5 keys to leading effective meetings. Invest the time needed up front to walk through the planning process. Start the meeting with an energetic tone, review the agenda, and establish roles and ground rules. During the meeting, facilitate the discussion and help keep the participants focused. And finally, to conclude the meeting, summarize the accomplishments, address any unfinished business, and finalize the next course of action. I wish you great success in leading your next meeting. For additional information and resources, please visit the Supervisory Update webpage.